Hey everybody, you're watching Cateroll Hunter, and today we're going to take a look at some small scent albums, some penny collections that I purchased, and these are really exciting because if I open this up, we are going to see a whole lot of older design King George V pennies, and I got 3 albums here to look at, and I'm super stoked. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, it's James and you're watching my channel Cateroll Hunter, and today we've got 3 Canadian small scent albums to look through. These are albums that I picked up a long time ago and I haven't looked through them yet. I got these from my subscriber Monty, and you'll remember if you watch my channel, Monty sold me at face value a huge stash, a hoard of Canadian pennies, and Monty has been collecting these pennies for many years. They were from storage lockers, so that's one of his hobbies, is buying storage lockers and going to auctions and bidding on lots. And so these are 3 albums that I picked up at the same time as all those pennies. These might have come from auctions, they might have come from storage lockers, but these are people's collections that sort of found their way to Monty, and they've now found their way to me. And I just have been sitting on these, and I've just been wanting to get into them, but I haven't had an opportunity. So today's the day, and I'm really happy to share this. So what these are, these Whitman folders are Canadian small scents, and these albums go from 1920 all the way down to, I think there's a couple older ones, and they go to 1960 is the last date. So you can see they're not complete, and they're actually missing a lot of the key dates. So this album here has a handful of King George V, but not too many. And you can see that all of these coins, or most of these coins, are pretty brown and they're pretty circulated. So I don't expect that we're going to find anything crazy. There are a few bright and shiny ones we're going to want to check and see if there are any varieties. We'll want to see if we've got any of the interesting varieties. There's a 48 we want to look at. There's a 49 we want to look at. The key dates in Canadian pennies are 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. You can see they're all about $1 million or so, a little bit more for 26. I don't think we've got any of them in here, but we're going to look at these together. So this is one album that we've got. Now we've seen this one. We're going to look in a little bit more depth. And so I'll close this one up and I'll go to the next one here. This one has the number 4 on it. So this, again, no key dates here. And it's got a bunch of the older, or I should say the newer King George V and King George VI. And then right into this album goes all the way to 1972. And so there's a few nicer ones in here. But again, we're going to look and see if we have any of those interesting varieties. There's no spaces for those in the 48 and 49. And it's all about where the A is pointing to what kind of denticle. We'll get into that. And the most complete album is the first one that I showed you in the intro. This one has all of the King George V scents. And most of these albums will also have an extra one that is for the obverse side. Now the reverse is showing on here and it's been flipped over. Somebody might have looked to see, you can see I got paint on my hand, I've been painting. Somebody might look to see if there was a key date in here, if somebody had put that in not knowing what it was. Now you can see these are all looking pretty brown, and that's okay, but we're going to take them out of here. I'm going to have a look and see if any are in better condition. When they're brown like this, it's hard to tell. We're going to look at some of the markers on the obverse to see if any of these might be in a better condition or a higher grade. It doesn't look from the surface that they will be, but you just never know. So we're going to start, I think, with this album that is most complete. I'm going to get these out and we'll take a look at some of these. Okay, we got all our pennies out of the album, and across the 3 albums, we actually had 4 1920s because one was in an obverse slot. We got a 21. We didn't get any of the key dates, 22, 23, 24, 25, or 26, and there's really no surprise there. We got 127, a 28, 3 29s. There's a very interesting variety of 29 we're going to look for. And we got a 30, a 31. We got 4 32s. So The 20 and the 32 are the most common of all of these King George V pennies. We got a few 33s, 34s, couple 35s, and 3 1936s. And so a couple of curious things. The 36 is also a fairly common year, but this album here that I've got actually has a spot for the rare 1936 with dot. And they don't even take the little circle out for you to put the penny in. And it lists an official mintage of 678,000. That's based on the Royal Canadian Mint's official figures. However, there are only 3 known examples. They're all in specimen condition, so it's not likely that any actually circulated the 1936 with the dot under the date. Nevertheless, we'll check. You never know. Maybe there's 4 and we've got one right here. Who knows? We'll find out. Now, if you happen across some Canadian small cents like this, you'll want to have your Charlton guide handy because it's got lots of good information. It's got values. What I expect is that all of the coins we're probably going to find are probably going to be in the VG range. And all of these common dates are probably going to be worth about 50 cents. And I know that's not a lot. There might be a couple that are a little bit more than that. Of course, if we had better grades, some will be worth a few dollars, a little bit more. And so we'll want to check and see if any of these are in a better condition than we can kind of tell by the brown toning on the coins. We'll want to check and see, of course, because that makes a difference in what kind of coin we've got and the value of it. But again, I'm not expecting a lot. These are probably just somebody's collection. They just took a penny out of change. But what I do want to let you know about is how difficult it would be to actually find one of these coins and why it's kind of a big deal and why it's exciting for me. These King George V pennies, for me, if you're an American, this might make more sense. I find that these are the equivalent of an Indian head cent. And think about that. How often would you expect to find an Indian head cent, either in change or in coin roll hunting? Some collectors will never find one, even if they do coin roll hunting. They're that scarce. And the reason for that is because they look completely different than the modern pennies with Lincoln from 1909 on. Even the wheat cents that have a different reverse design are similar enough that they don't stand out so much. So that's what I would equate these to. They're the Canadian equivalent of the Indian head cent. So finding them in the wild is going to be really difficult. The King George VI and the Queen Elizabeth laureate portrait, I kind of liken those to the Canadian, is like the Canadian equivalent of the wheat cent, right? It's different enough. It's got the familiar maple leaf design on the reverse, but the obverse is different because we've got a different monarch from Queen Elizabeth who was on coins for 70 years. And so they're always fun to find, and that's why I pulled them aside. Well, let's get looking into these ones. I'm going to start going through, and I'll let you know if I've got any that stand out in terms of condition, and then we'll look at some varieties. I pulled up one of these 1920s under the scope so we can look together at what it is that I'm looking at to determine if a coin is in a better condition or grade or not. Now, I am not a professional coin grader. I am a coin collector. I'm an enthusiast. I've seen lots of coins. I could give this a rough grade, but I don't work for a grading company, and I'm not going to look at all of the finer things that graders, professional graders, might look at. But for these King George V coins, the high point of the coin is this band of the crown. This is where you'll first see wear. Now that you can see on this coin, there is wear all over this coin, and there are different things we could be looking at, but we can see all of the devices. We can see all of the writing. It's not really slick, but the band of the crown here has lost all of its definition. You can barely see the jewels that would be across here, and the band is almost sort of worn into his face and the back of his head. This is probably an average circulated coin. This is probably a VG. This is what we're expecting we were going to find. So it's a lower grade coin. It's not a really terrible coin. Lots of good detail on the reverse with the maple leaves. But the easiest way, as I said, is to look at this obverse to see how much detail there is. And this is not a bad looking coin when you've got it in your hand. When you put it under the scope, it's not going to be as good. But the band of the crown tells me this is probably a VG. It's no better than that. If there was more definition, it might be a fine, an F. Now here's another one of those 1920s where it's definitely in worse condition The reverse doesn't look much different, but the obverse, a lot of the rim has sort of worn away. You can still see the full crown, but it has worn. It looks like it's been scraped or scratched. Scoping them is helpful to see some of that detail, but just getting a look at it like this, you can see this is a bit of a lower grade coin, and that's okay. This is still a very cool coin. This 1921 here, I can't tell what's going on. It looks like maybe somebody's tried to clean it. It could have something stuck on it. When I put it under the scope and take a look, you can see it's got all sorts of issues in there. It might have been a chemical reaction with something. We can't even really see much of the band of the crown, so I don't really know what's going on. So this one here is definitely going to grade worse than a VG, so it's not a very valuable cent. Now this 1927 is actually in pretty nice condition. It's got really good detail here. You can see not a lot of wear on those leaves. If I flip it over and we look at King George V, you can see a lot of detail in the band of that crown. You can see the jewels. So this could be a high F or a low VF. Probably puts it at a $3 coin, I'd say, in that condition. That's a really nice surprise because we don't normally see them this nice in these kinds of albums. So we got three 1929s, and there is a valuable variety we're going to want to find. And it's the difference between a coin in VG being worth 50 or 75 cents and being worth about $20. And it all has to do with the position of the 9. And the Charlton Guide has a couple of pictures that can help you. You can see the top one, the standard 9, that's the 50 cent, 75 cent version. The high 9, as you can see on the bottom picture, shows that that 9 is just slightly raised up, almost tilted a little bit to the left. That's the one we want to be looking for. And if you haven't already got a Charlton Guide, use the discount code CRH20 at charltonpress.com. You'll want to do that because this guide shows all the things you want to be looking for, all the things we're going to look at today. You can see information in here, and it's invaluable. If you want to find cool stuff, you got to know what you're looking for, and this guide will tell you for sure. So let's take these 29s under the scope and have a peek. Here is the first one, and the easiest way to tell if you've got the high 9 or low 9 or normal 9 is to look at the tail of the 9 and where it is relative to the 2. If you have a high 9, it's going to sit on the same plane, the same level as that 2. This is the common low 9. That's not the one we're looking for, so we want to get the next one in here and take a peek. And this looks like it's the same one. This is going to be the standard one. And we got one more chance for glory here. We're going to take a look. And this one looks to be the same. So no surprises. We got three common normal 9 1929s. That's okay. I'm not going to complain. I'm ecstatic about getting some King George V coins in my collection. And you never know. I'll just keep looking. Next time, we could come up on the right side of things. And all of these 29s are in better than average condition. We've got some decent definition on the crown. I might give this one an F. They're all pretty close. This might not even be the best one of the three, but that's better than I'd expected. So we got two 1930s, and that's a bit of a better date. It's probably in a VG about a $3.50 coin, $3.50, not $350. And I'd say they're both about that. I'm just trying to get the focus on here. They're both about a VG. You can see the band of that crown is almost worn through. The other one is very similar. So nothing spectacular, but these ones are harder to come by. They're minted at just 2.5 million. And who knows how many of these are still around. Gonna skip ahead all the way to the 1930s. We're gonna skip ahead all the way to 1936. Of the coins that I've already looked at, most were in a VG. There were a couple that were in a good solid F, fine. But we want to check and see if these 36s might have that dot. So let's take a closer look. So first of all, this is what we're looking for, a tiny little dot below the 1936. That's what we're hoping to find. I pulled the first one up under the scope and I do not see a dot. And so we've struck out there. Now the likelihood is it is exceptionally unlikely. No dot there. And no dot there. But these coins are still pretty cool. You're just not going to find one of these. Not very likely coin roll hunting. I have never found a King George V penny in a hunt. I found a couple of King George V nickels And that was pretty exciting. Kind of some of the highlights of my coin roll hunting career, but never found a penny just yet. Okay, I think we'll move on from the King George V. No real surprises. We found pretty much what I was expecting. Average condition circulated coins. There were a few that were worse than the average and a few that were a little bit better than the average, but we didn't get anything high grade. I don't think we even got anything approaching a high VF, or certainly not an EF or XF as it's called in the States. So we're going to move on and see if we can find any varieties in the later cents. So we've got 3 1948s we can scope to see if we found an interesting variety. The variety we're looking for is, you can see in the Charlton Guide here, the A pointing to a small denticle, and that is this one right here, where the denticles look like just little lines as opposed to larger denticles. So we'll want to scope them and see, and it's the difference between it being a 50-cent and a $10 coin in a VF condition. Now, we don't know if these are in a VF condition. We'll take a closer look. They look like they're pretty circulated, but if we found a variety, it'd be really cool. So here's our first one, and this is the A pointing between two large denticles. This is not the one I'm going to look for, so we'll go to the next one, and we're looking at it's the second A in gratia. So we'll look at this one. This is the A pointing to a large denticle. So that is another variety. We got 2. Let's see if we can luck out on this last one. And we can already see that these are large denticles. This is an A pointing to large denticles. So again, we didn't find this variety. Now, depending on how long these coins have been in these albums, some of these varieties weren't really well known until somewhat later. Obviously, these albums were made in the 60s or up to 1960s. So it was known then, but many collectors wouldn't have known really what to look for, and they weren't marked in these kinds of albums. So you just never know if you're going to find something that somebody's overlooked or weren't even aware of. That's why we look. Similarly, for the 1949s, I've got one under the scope. What we're looking for is the A, the second A in gratia, pointing to a denticle. And in this case, we can clearly see it's pointing between these two denticles. So that's not it. So we'll get our second one here, see if we can get lucky. In this case, this one is also pointing between the denticles. This coin is in pretty decent shape. It's still got some detail in the hair. That's what we're often looking for with these King George VI coins. They're hard to tell on the surface because they're brown, and so they look like they're pretty circulated. But if you just get this one in the light, you can see this 1949 has a lot of detail. What it's got as well, of course, is some level of environmental damage, what's made it turn brown, just from the way it's been stored for all these years, but it doesn't have a lot of circulation wear, even if it might be just a little bit dirty around the letters. The next variety we're going to look at is the 1953, and we actually have 4 to choose from because one of these was in the obverse slot in an album. So 3 albums, but we got 4 to look at, and particularly it's the shoulder fold versus no shoulder fold variety that we're going to look for. So I'm going to grab one of these to start with. We'll throw it under the scope and we'll show you what we're looking for. The 1953 variety we're looking for is the shoulder fold variety, and that would have a line along the shoulder of the queen. And because of the wear on some of these coins, it's really hard to see. So what we want to look at is up here on day and looking at the font. And the font is different, and that's helpful. What we're looking for is basically the serifs on this I are quite flared. This is the no shoulder fold, the common variety. We've got a few more to scope and see. If that I looks slimmer and doesn't have as much of a flared end, we would have the more scarce shoulder fold variety. This is the no shoulder fold. All right, well, number 2 is also the common no shoulder fold. Number 3 here, same thing, no surprise. And number 4, will we luck out? Not today. All of them are the no shoulder fold common variety. Here's the 1954 to look at, and you can see this I has far less detail or flaring at the ends there. This is the very common shoulder fold variety. That was the common one in 1954. That's the one we'd expect to find. The 54 and the 55 varieties are far less common, much, much harder to find. The 53 is something you might be able to find coin roll hunting or looking through collections. Another one to look at is the 1965, particularly the pointed 5. There's a variety in the pointed 5 that you want to look at. And these are both the blunt 5. Even though the end of the 5 is on a bit of an angle, the pointed 5 is far more acute towards this twig. It's a lot closer to that twig. This one looks like it's got some interesting kind of... I thought it might have had some doubling on that one, but it really doesn't. It's actually the shadow. It's always good to rotate them around to see if that doubling persists or if it goes away. And it went away. It was probably just a shadow. If you see, if I get the light going in a certain angle, you see a little bit of an extra line there, but that's not real, not actual real doubling at all. So this 1965, though, under the scope, it doesn't look that great, but it's actually a pretty nice looking coin if I don't toss it around. So before we wrap up, I'm going to look at the rest of these and see if there's anything else interesting. There are some minor varieties we could look for that aren't as easy to find. There are some die clashes we can find, some hanging numbers. I'll see if we can find an example of one of those. And in fact, I think we have one right here on this 1962. I'm going to try to get this one out without marking it up, but we have a 1962 hanging too. I'll look at all the other ones in these 3 albums to see if there might be any others, and we'll take a peek. Here it is, and that's pretty clear, that 1962. You can see that impression there, that die clash, that makes it look like the 2 is actually just hanging from this leaf. It's a really cool variety, and you can find this in most of the pennies from the, I think even from the late 40s, but definitely through the 50s and the 60s. It is fairly common. It's still harder to find, but it's a common occurrence across all those years. If we flip the coin over and we look at the obverse, what you're actually seeing is the impression of the queen's chin and neck. That is what was impressed on the opposite die, on the reverse die, when those 2 coins made contact. This one is pretty easy to see. If I rotate it around, you can see it persists. It's very cool. And you can actually find this hanging variety with double, triple, and even quadruple hanging, where that die clash has happened several times, where those dies, those same dies, were pressed against each other without a planchet. And so this got marked on the coin several times, just slightly different position, enough that you could actually see it. And one that's really strong like this one, it's possible that these dies struck one another more than once, but in the same position, to really make that so easy to see. This one is a great example of the hanging 2. And in hand, it's a pretty good looking coin with lots of mint luster still. Really cool. The only other variety of note that we could find in the coins that we had here was any doubling on the 1967. There's some die deterioration doubling we can often see on the reverse legend here, Canada 1867, 1967. We don't see that here. And there's a true double die on this variety. If I flip it over and look at this legend, we could see doubling on Regina, DG Regina here, and we don't see that at all. So that's not what we've got. We only had one because, of course, these albums really only went to 1960. We just had one that went up to 72. And so that is just the single coin we got. But that's about it for our hunt. We actually had the opportunity to look through a whole bunch of old King George V coins, and that was lots of fun and really cool. We got what we expected to get, some pretty circulated, average, ordinary coins. We didn't get any of the key dates, but you never know what you're going to find. When you get an album like this, people collect things. Some people would have a key date and not know it's a key date. It's possible that they were in the albums at one point in time, and over time somebody might have found them and taken them out, or because they're scarce, the owner of the album never had it to begin with. In any case, I have flipped up this 1962 hanging 2. It's kind of got some good toning and still good eye appeal on it. Really lovely coin. But it's always fun to go through old albums. You never know what you're going to find, and I just happened to luck out when I talked to Monty, and he said, hey, I got something I think you might like, and I sure did. So I really enjoyed looking through those. I hope you enjoyed that too. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Give the video a like if you can. That would be really helpful. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, Cadroll Hunter, please do that. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time. The sponsors of today's video are Lighthouse Canada and the Charlton Press. Lighthouse Canada is the leading supplier of high-quality numismatic supplies in Canada, and the Charlton Press is the leading publisher of coin and paper money catalogs and price guides for Canadian collectors. Go check out their online stores today and use the exclusive discount code CRH20 for 20% off all your purchases.